Okay, we're live. Oh, spring has hit my nasal cavity with such ferocity. I'll tell you what, I never really had allergy issues until, I don't know, the last couple of years, really. Anyway, that's how my day's going. It's just it's an annoying thing because it's like, am I sick? No, I'm just like dealing with allergies. Cool. Cool, bro. Um, so I'm just gonna like do some quick cleanup on this sketch because as soon as I looked at it, I was like, it's not quite where I wanted it to be. And also, I need to, I don't know, I wanted this character to be holding like a blunderbuss type thing. It looks like he's holding a flashlight. Uh, maybe he's, maybe we'll just kind of redo that hand. So my apologies if I have to like sneeze a bunch during this stream. Maybe doing it today was just a bad idea because all I'm gonna do is sneeze the whole time. But maybe that'll make it exciting. Oh, Matt sneeze? Okay, this is like... Maybe I'm just not gonna have anything in this hand. Maybe he'll just be holding a rock. That's kind of a fun idea. Actually, now that I think about it. Just have him hold a big boulder. Why is he holding a big boulder? Wouldn't you like to know? Okay. I think we can work with this. Adjustments may need to be made along the way. Varb says, I never noticed how cool your table looks. Well, thank you. I'm glad you appreciate the look of my table. Yeah, I mean, I do like the grain on here. This is a very, like... it looks way cooler than it actually is. Because this is like some table I got on, like, Wayfair. It's very, like... made out of, I don't know, particle board or something, but it does have a nice... I'm with you. I do like the grainy look of it. But it is not very... It is not as sturdy as it looks. I'll put it that way. Because, like, I chipped it, like, putting it together. Like, it's just like, it works. Like, it does its job as a table. It's not the hardest job to do in the world, right? I mean, I could be a table if I wanted to. I guess that would be kind of hard. I'm probably not professional level table. I'm just going to bring this in a little bit so you can see it better. Just realizing that I had it pulled out kind of a lot. I mean, it would be hard to live life as a table unless you were a table. Like, unless you're, like, made out of wood, you don't really need to move around a lot. It's otherwise quite difficult to be a table. And yet, oddly enough, you don't have to get a license to be a table. You just show up for the job. Just like, I'm a table. Hi. And they go, oh, yeah, we've looked at your resume. And we think you have very good credentials, but actually we think you may be overqualified for this position. And we're thinking of going with somebody else who is basically just a plank of wood that we situated some legs onto. So, good luck in your search. Just gonna draw this bare-chested hog man. He's got a scar across his dead eye. And a mean hog scowl. You know what's really funny too? I was just thinking about this, like being a person, it might be easier to be a standing. Well, no, being a standing desk would be just as hard, if not harder. It really doesn't make sense to like have people work as tables. They're just not. They're just not good at it. We had a huge storm blow through Louisiana yesterday, in the South in general. I was talking to friends last night, and they were saying that some of the winds reached up to about 100 miles per hour. It was probably, apparently a tornado touched down in my hometown. And, it really messed some homes up. But fortunately, everybody I know, they're okay. Nothing too badly damaged. But apparently it frightened them a bit. I know it woke me up at around 8 in the morning. It was the kind of storm where it's so windy and it's so there's so much rain, like it just looks like it's moving sideways. It's not really falling down. It's just like flat plane of rain. But now today it's clear blue skies, very sunny, and there's way too much pollen in the air. So that's really wrecked my nose. I'll tell you what, I don't prefer it. But this is how it is every spring. Alright, so I'm gonna, oops. I'm sure y'all can probably still hear me, but it looks like I have to reconnect my phone for some reason. Just give me a second here. I'll walk you through the process. What causes this to happen? Alright, hold on. We're gonna see if I can disconnect, reconnect. The old switcheroo. Okay. And we'll pair the device. See if we can do this in enough time. Yay! Wow, that's so much better than just shutting the stream down for no reason at all. Okay, back to what we were doing. So anyway, it's a nice spring day. I've got no complaints other than the pollen content in the atmosphere. And it is frustrating because it's just like, I don't know, just like low-grade headache the whole day. My eyes have that warm, hazy feeling of just like, ugh. So I don't know, maybe I need to go like eat some spicy food tonight to clear out my sinuses. It's an idea. I don't know if it's one I'm gonna commit myself to. All right. I was just thinking, might give this guy some more scars. Maybe one. Right there. Yeah, that'll work. I have thought of in the past about using a nib at some point, but I really like brush. I don't know. I've seen people get really good results with like G-nibs, which are apparently the big inking tool that the mangaka in Japan use. My thing with nibs is that you really have to press down. Oh, you don't have to press. I mean, you're supposed to not press down into the surface that hard, but inevitably, I don't know, it requires a little more pressure, whereas a brush doesn't really require so much pressure. Relatively speaking. I just realized I don't really know what's going on with these feet here. There we go. Ooh, I got messed up a little bit. Need to make sure that he's got fingernails. kind of want to paint this guy too. We might get to some painting today. We'll see. I haven't made my mind up yet how much I want to do, because I know at some point this afternoon I want to go practice some Tai Chi in the sunshine. But that's much later. Let's focus on right now. Belly button ring. Alright, so that's one. Which one do I want to start on next? I've got like 4 different illustrations that I want to do today. So I've got 1 down, so that means 3, right? I guess we'll start with this gal. This character was featured in a strip I was drawing recently of The Legend of Redneck. And I was like, oh, it'd be fun to like draw that character full-bodied, because she just exists kind of in the background. I was like, well, I'd be interested in knowing like more of what the entirety of this character looks like, potentially for future purposes. Oh, knees. In terms of body parts that I have sort of fudged in terms of drawing in the past, and I've gotten better at drawing, I would say knees are probably one of them. Another one is feet. Oh, I really would kind of fudge it on drawing feet for a long time, and I've gotten a lot better at drawing them. I think the main thing was that I stopped trying to avoid drawing them, because I would compose panels that I was drawing to okay, let's avoid showing feet, kind of. That kind of thing. So eventually what I decided to do is just start embracing all the things I felt unconfident about drawing. And lo and behold, I got a little bit better at drawing them. It's funny how that works. Or even if I didn't get better at drawing them, I got more confident at drawing them. Which is also often a thing. It's like I don't know, this foot that I just drew, it's not my best. It really isn't. But it's one of those things where somebody who looks at it's not going to really pay that much attention to it. They're just going to be like, okay, it looks like a foot, and they'll move on as their eye reads over the image. Which is, you know, sometimes that's how it goes. Sometimes you just want it to be good enough that it fits in with the whole of the image. A lot of times what happens is, you know, when somebody looks at a drawing and they sort of read it as a bad drawing, oftentimes what the issue is maybe certain qualities of the drawing are very good, but then there are certain qualities that are very bad, and so the parts that are very bad just stick out like a sore thumb. And there are a lot of artists who I've looked at their work and I've been like, oh, okay, they're very good at this thing, this thing, this thing, and then it's like, oh, they're not so great at this thing. But because they're able to draw it in such a way that it at least fits in with the drawing and it doesn't look like it's like, you know, like it doesn't look like, okay, most of this drawing was drawn by a professional and then there's this one part that looks like it was drawn by a fifth grader. Like, you know, nothing against fifth graders, but they're still learning. But anyway, my point being, like, just from going through that sort of learning how to make things work well enough, you can make a drawing look whole and complete, even though there may be parts where you're not exactly hitting the mark like you want to. And that's okay, because you don't necessarily have to hit the mark every single time. Like, you want to get as close as possible, as often as possible. But, you know, just odds being what they are, sometimes you're not going to hit the ball when it, you know, gets to your... I don't know where I'm going with this metaphor. Sometimes you're going to miss a pitch. That's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes you're going to even strike out. In fact, Varb says, my fifth grade sister is a better artist than me. Oh. Well, then what do I know? So I was just going to say, like, this was a drawing I did the other night, and I'm actually redoing this drawing because while I liked some of the qualities and aspects of the character design, first and foremost, like, this arm is like way too long compared to this arm. I didn't quite like the pose. It didn't quite achieve what I wanted. I wanted the legs to be more bow-legged. But I was like, you know, I like the overall idea here, and it's like getting pretty close, but it's not close enough for me to say I want to like call that a done piece. So like I redid this drawing and I'm going to re-ink it a little bit. So, you know, there is a pretty big difference between these two, and it'll be more noticeable once I go to inking it. But the general idea being, like, sometimes you have drawings that you just need to redo. And it happens. You just want to get, like, going back to my baseball metaphor, you just want to, like, get to the point where your batting average is good enough that, you know, the misses aren't so bad. The misses aren't, like, the pitches that you miss aren't going to put you into dire straits. I feel like there was a better way I could have gone with that metaphor. Like, the pitches you could have missed won't strike you out? I don't know. I'm gonna have to work on that one. But there's something there. But yeah, hands were another thing that took me a long time to figure out how to draw. I'm still learning. Once again, I mean, sometimes I draw hands, I'm like, that's a good hand. Then sometimes I draw hands, I'm like, I don't know. That one needs to go back to the drawing board. Alright. I'm already seeing an issue pop up here where I want to... Hold on. I think I would prefer having a straight edge to use. Just to make sure it lines up appropriately. Because I don't think it lines up appropriately at all. Still don't think it lines up appropriate at all. Alright. That might work. That might not work. What am I doing wrong here? Okay. I mean, objectively, I can say for myself, as a 5th grader, I did not draw particularly well. I don't know. I guess as a 5th grader, I must have drew okay, because people seem to like what I drew. Probably being too hard on my, 5th grade self. I definitely knew 5th graders who could draw extremely well when I was a 5th grader. And I was very jealous of their talent. But that person was like a prodigy. There's not much you can do about that. An absolute gosh darn prodigy. Of course, back in the day when I drew comics, it was a pretty what's the right word? It was very basic. Like, I would take drawing paper, right, and just start drawing. And sometimes if I wanted to ink, I would ink it with a ballpoint pen. Throw in some coloring pencils. Staple the pages together. Bada bing, bada boom, you had a comic. I mean, it worked. It got the job done. And I guess when you're a 5th grader, that's what matters most, is just getting the job done. I mean, I guess really not that much has changed. That's still kind of the case. When I was a kid, I drew, just says, bada bing, bada boom. It's the motto for today. Bada bing, bada boom. There you go. You got yourself a finished comic book. But yeah, I was just thinking, like, as a kid, like, when I drew comics, it was just like, my audience was my classroom. Because, like, I would, I'd have these stapled together comics that I'd, like, shove into the book shelf. I don't think I asked the teacher at all. I was just like, this goes here. And then, like, I guess some of the students would read them and they enjoyed them. And then my other audience was just my close friends who they couldn't do anything about it because I would just show up at their house and draw comics at their house and just like leave them there. But when you're a kid, that's what you do. Find the easiest markets. Didn't need a literary agent. Didn't even need a publishing platform. It's funny how that changes. So that's illustration 2, inked. I mean, at the speed I'm going, we probably will be painting. Unless I'm suddenly like, oh, I'm tired. Boo. My sinuses. Ooh. Which, don't get me wrong, I might still use that excuse. I could throw that excuse out there. But it's changed so much because, like, when I was in 5th grade, the only thing I knew about comics is you buy them at the grocery store or at the comic book shop, and my parents won't let me go to the comic book shop because it's full of like covers that for them they felt were either too lewd or violent. So, I had to pick up my comics at the grocery store. At that time, you could buy comics at the grocery store. I think you can still probably buy Archie comics at the grocery store, but I don't know well enough. But I remember as a kid, you could still buy like Marvel and DC comics at the grocery store. And they were always like conveniently placed next to the candy aisle. Or next to, oh man, this really is like bringing it back. Like the VHS section. Back in the long, long ago, when we still used physical media to watch movies. And so anyway, there was only one comic that I ever bought every month, and that was Sonic the Hedgehog. I was very much into the Archie comics run of Sonic the Hedgehog comics. And, looking back, I'm trying to figure out what it was that I enjoyed about it, other than that I was just like a huge Sonic nerd as a kid. Even though I didn't own a Sega Genesis, that's a really funny part about it. I did not own a Sega console until the Dreamcast. And I just played like I would just play Sonic on my friend's Sega Genesis cuz like I had one friend in the neighborhood who had a Sega Genesis and for whatever reason everybody else had a Super Nintendo. Um I don't know why that is. Jess says I was too cool for comic books when I was a kid. What were you reading? Were you just like reading like the scholastic stuff? Like I did read a fair amount of like this, like Goosebumps, Animorphs, that kind of thing. Ooh, Animorphs is a whole thread I could really get onto if y'all want me to. That book series changed my life. Just says I did have a Sega and I did play Sonic. That was cool for some reason. Yeah, it is funny. Like I don't know. Like for me, like all the kids who had Sega Genesis consoles were like they were the cool, edgy ones, and most of my friends just had Super Nintendos for whatever reason. It just worked out that way. But yeah. So I had one friend who did have a Sega Genesis, and I would play Sonic the Hedgehog on his console all the time, and then like Sega Channel. I don't know if anybody remembers Sega Channel, but it was actually like wildly ahead of its time. Like like ahead of its time in a way that like doesn't make any sense. But basically, I'm not sure how the technology worked, but I think it was done through a cable, like a cable television type setup. And essentially like it was video game streaming before streaming even really existed. And they would have a circulating pool of games. This will probably just sound like very current models today, but they had like a circulating pool of games that they would update. I would say like every month, as I recall. And I think there was a couple of games on Sega Channel that were like mainstays. And I have no idea how much that service cost. It was probably wildly expensive. But it was super cool. Like in fact I had two friends who had Sega Channel. I don't know if it wasn't I don't know if it wasn't very it must have not been very popular because it didn't like last a super long amount of time, as far as I recall. But I mean, neither did the Sega Genesis. Like the Sega Genesis, kind of, it had issues, I guess. Because then Sega was like, "Well, we're gonna beat the competition by making the Sega CD," and then there's like what was it called? They had a couple of things. It was like maybe I'm mixing it up. There was like some kind of attachment that you could put on the Sega Genesis that would tighten up the graphics and like you could play like one or two games on it that you couldn't otherwise play. Like Chaotix. Which I don't know if that game actually ever did that well. But anyway, that was something. Hold on, I'm going to take a sip here. That was something that, like, as I've looked back in the timeline, it's become very apparent to me, like, oh, like, Sega was actually, like, way ahead of its time in terms of the stuff that they were developing, in terms of, like, the general set of ideas that they had for, like, their consoles. And like part of their problem as a company, or what ended up leading to them having to discontinue console making, and I think they went bankrupt at one point. But anyway, what got them into that position was that they were always trying to outdo the competition by being the first to the gate, right? And like the issue was they were always like putting themselves in sort of burdensome financial positions with their ambitions. And so, that eventually led to the much aggrieved fall of the Sega Dreamcast, which was one of my favorite consoles ever. And maybe that was just because of the like time and place in which the Dreamcast was released. I just have very fond memories of 1999, I guess. And for me, Sega Genesis, or not Sega Genesis, Sega Dreamcast, the Dreamcast console, was like the most quintessentially like 1999 thing. It was one of the first consoles that had online play. Not that I ever really used the online play that much. I used it once. I used it to play Phantasy Star Online with friends who lived in another town. But it was pretty burdensome because at that time we were still dealing with 56K modems. And so, this being the date and age that it was, if you were on a 56K modem, your phone line was tied up. Because I mean, I don't know. The way I'm about to describe this, it does kind of make that date and age, that era, seem almost like barbaric. Because just the sheer amount of chaos and like difficulty in terms of using the internet at that time was enormously just ridiculous. Because everything, at that time you had two different main things in the household. You had your landline and you had your cable, right? And the cable was almost exclusively for television. Now, of course, that changed at some point. But, basically exclusively for television. And then, the landline was for your phone. And this was before the invention of what I'll just call personal phone, because that's honestly what we should call them nowadays. Instead of smartphones, we should just call them personal phones, because previously, up until that point, phones were pretty much communal. Unless you were able to convince your parents to let you have a phone in your room, but even then, it was still technically a communal line, right? Because most families just had one line and they all shared that line. So if you were on the phone and you were talking to your friend, you could have the situation pop up where it's your mom picks up the phone in the kitchen and you suddenly hear your mom go, Susan, I need to call Betty at church. Can you please get off the line with your friend? And then, you've got to go. Things have changed a lot since then. So anyway, my point being, in the age of 56K, if you're going to use the internet, it's a commitment, right? It's a full-on commitment. You're going on. You're going to try and make the most of it. You've only got maybe at best, 40, 30, 45 minutes. Maybe if you're really lucky, you have an hour to like check out what the new strategy is for the Pokemon trading card game. And then, mom or dad's going to be like, hey, son, I got to use the phone. I got to call my boss to talk about work stuff. I don't know, simpler times. So anyway, the idea of like playing a full-on video game online, right? That was a resource commitment that most families could not even bother to bear. Unless, your parents were willing to like pony up an entire landline just for your room. Which, how often did that happen? Probably not that often. That's just my 2 cents on the matter. I mean, my family was the kind of family where we didn't even get cable until I was 13. So, like, we really we had a very communal setup for just about everything growing up. And so, going with that pace, we didn't get broadband internet until I think I moved out. I think I'd moved out by the time my parents got broadband cable, actually. I'd gone to college. That was my first experience with broadband cable. And how sweet it was. Ugh, those are rough times. I mean, it's very interesting thinking about it now. Like, I kind of realizing as I'm talking about this, like, I really have gotten to this point where I'm taking for granted sort of the technological advances that I get to, like, make full use of these days. I mean, something like this, streaming, myself working, unthinkable. Completely unthinkable. Never would have even crossed my mind. Not even for a second. I think what's even weirder now is just like, I think societally now we kind of just take for granted how much technology advances at like its breakneck pace nowadays. To the point where it's like, oh yeah, they got some new AI thing. It does the bada bing, bada boom AI and blah blah blah. And it's like, oh, that's cool. You just move on with your day. I mean, I'm speaking from a perspective of somebody who like playing Mario 64 or like Nights into Dreams for the first time, just like thinking how we've entered a new age. Things will never be the same, and they weren't the same after that. But point being, That was a pretty big shift. Like that was like a consciousness shift. It was so big. And so I say all this because I kind of wonder sometimes, like, I guess we don't experience that in the same way nowadays. We almost like kind of just expect it. And those kind of things were not expected in that day, you know? Like, Not Save says, I might do the bada bing, bada boom, but does it do the boom de yada? No, we don't got any boom de yadas here. Not Save says, it really was a phase change. No, it super was. And I mean, the amount, like, here's the thing. In order for the internet to even happen, a couple of companies had to just be outright sacrificed, just thrown to the waste. Like America Online, God bless America Online. The internet wouldn't exist without them because they were the only ones foolish enough to be like, we're just going to print CDs en masse so that we can get people on the internet because we got to make money off of this thing some way, somehow. We don't know how we're going to do it, but we're just going to throw CDs at every household in America until this thing works. And, you know, it probably wasn't a good business model for America Online, but it worked out great for everybody else. But, you know, it's stuff like that I think we kind of forget about sometimes as we probably become too used to what we have now. I don't know. I mean, do we need to set up a plaque somewhere or a statue a statue somewhere in New York City that's just like a bronzed America Online packet? I would do this. I would personally do this if I had that kind of money. The America Online Memorial. They gave their one good business loan so that we could have the internet. Not Safe says, a tiny tombstone made of old AOL discs. Ooh, oh man. I wonder if people still have AOL discs. Because, like, I don't know if they're really worth something nowadays, but they would be worth it for that. Just, oh, that's what's so wild, too, is there was a time where you probably could build, you know, a mausoleum entirely out of AOL discs. Now they're all, like, in some landfill over in New Jersey. You could make like a giant mirror out of AOL discs. Or you could like Varb says, Hey guys, what are AOL disks? So you see, back in the long, long ago, we used physical media such as CDs, and you'd have to have CD readers in all of your computers so that you could. Okay, imagine the internet doesn't exist, and you got to get files into your computer somehow, right? So we started off with floppy disks, and floppies were all right. But then we needed something that could hold way more information. So for some reason, somebody was like, well, let's use silicon disks. And so the compact disc, I cannot say disc, by the way. The compact disc was created. The compact disc was very thin and worked very well for, humanity's purposes to get files into computers. And sometimes you can even rewrite them, you could do things with them. Well, anyway, before the internet was even a thing, this company called America Online was hell-bent on getting America online. Nobody really knows why, but I guess they thought they saw dollar signs in their eyes to make it happen. And so they would just mail an America Online disc to every household every month or every year. I don't know. It just seemed like they just showed up. Like phone books. Oh, that's another piece of technology I'm going to have to explain to you. And so people in the United States were inundated with America Online discs because America Online was trying to get America Online. That was the whole idea. And so AOL discs are compact discs. Oh my god. You have no idea how much effort it requires for me to say the word disc. Or discs. Discs. That is the hardest word I've ever said. Anyway. So that's what AOL discs are. They were a method for the company called America Online to get the United States on the internet. Not Save says, I recall seeing an art piece out of some old CDs like that when I was going about in Seattle. And then Not Save says, Varb, precious tiny baby bean. Varb making me feel old. I kind of feel sad though that there's an entire generation that is not going to have that experience. Because it's I personally look back at it fondly. Maybe this later generation would look at this and go, what were you people thinking? And maybe they're right? Maybe they're correct to think and feel that way. But as somebody who grew up in that era, I do remember it rather fondly and sort of miss what some people might call a bug, but I would say, it was a feature of the time. All right, so I've finished inking. We're going to move. Well, are we? Yeah, we're going to try and move to some watercolors. I'm at least going to try and paint this. Except I got to do a couple things. All right, hold on. I did not prepare my workstation at all for watercolors. Varb says, okay, I know what those are. I just didn't know that specific name. I did play Arcanum and Lego Indiana Jones on CDs. My pal has Tetris on a floppy disk. Such an old version. It's even soundless. Wow. That's actually at this point, it might as well be an antique. That's kind of incredible, actually, that something like that exists. I'm going to return in just a moment. I need to get some water. But before I go to get water, I'm going to read what Not Save says. It's all good. They will get their experiences that fill the same niche. We won't see it exactly, but they'll appreciate it for the mess it was then. And those after them will see it like kids see CDs. That's true. That's actually like, I have been kind of wondering, like, what is the technology of today that, you know, like Varb's generation is going to be like, oh, I feel so nostalgic about that thing, whatever that thing is. Like, will that thing be something like, I don't know, social media? Netflix? It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine, like, what's going to be the thing that in 20 years will be like, oh, yeah, you know, that was a thing long, long ago. But nowadays, we just beam movies right into our brains. We don't even watch movies. We just dream inside of each other's minds. Hold on. I mean, I do think that Varp says some bets I might have would be physical input. BCI is progressing fast. Noticeable lag. Owning games according to Ubisoft. Yeah, I can see what you mean by that. Physical media has certainly become very, or physical input. I see what you're saying. Yeah, like everything's just going to become like we won't even use controllers anymore. We'll just point at the computer and the computer's like, yes, you are connected now. Let's play video games with our brains. Or our chi fields, maybe. Who knows? Okay. I could see, I could make an argument that lag would be something that I could feel somewhat nostalgic about. I feel that way already about like slowdown on older arcade games. Like if I'm playing like a bullet hell shooter or something, like the older ones, they still have that happen where you get like a slowdown sometimes if the screen gets too chaotic. But that's pretty much a thing that's going away pretty rapidly. Not Save says physically owning your entertainment will likely become nostalgic. And I feel like it kind of already is, because I think that's sort of like that's like records, right? Like records have kind of become back in vogue because people are missing physical medium for music. And you know, you have people who argue that it actually sounds better on vinyl, and I don't know if that's really true. But I can see it being a fun experience. Varb says, I don't even mean physically. Nowadays, subscriptions are becoming more and more popular instead of owning digital files. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I actually would be very annoyed if everything became a subscription model because I do like being able to download files and well, you kind of own the file. You own the rights to the license, right? Ugh. Yuck. Not Save says, I think the subscription model is the future and it's not a consumer friendly model. Yeah, it's really not. Which is, my thoughts on that are always sort of like, Farb says, future doesn't care. Well, that's true that the future doesn't care. Well, what's really funny about that too is like, I kind of look at it as this in the same way that, like you have Walmart and then you have like other like Whole Foods, I guess, in terms of groceries or whatever. And so the really weird thing about how a lot of this commerce stuff works is like anything that becomes the quote unquote standard or like the most prolific thing that everybody uses eventually creates its own side market. And that side market then becomes a competing market. So like for every subscription model that gets created, there is like the potential of another market that gets created that's like, so in other words, like Blu-ray discs are going to become like the vinyl of 2030, or 2035, where hipsters are really into it, but most everybody uses a subscription model because it's more convenient. But nevertheless, you kind of have like this weird cottage industry that gets created out of it. Because you do have a lot of people who are like, well, I'd rather own the disc. I don't really like the idea of having a company like change things in my movies willy-nilly, or like, well, there are very obvious complaints about the subscription model, right? You just don't have access to the things you want to watch. You basically have to like just wait for the Disney Vault to get opened or closed or whatever. Not Save says, line go up, take all the monies. So yeah, I definitely see how that is going to be prevalent in the future, but at the same time, just seeing how things have kind of worked out in the music industry gives me some in the music industry, for whatever reason, seems to like have this tendency to be a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of what the in terms of like how data economics work. And so yes, you do have tons of streaming and subscription models these days. But then you have this huge kind of, I would not call it underground at this point, but you have this huge market of people who are like going out of their way to buy vinyls and record players for the music that they like. And even for like modern musicians, right? Like there's actually a decent amount of modern musicians now who are putting their music on vinyl, which is very strange because it's like, I guess I wouldn't have expected that, right? It's not something that necessarily makes 100% sense to me because it seems like in some sense you would say, oh, well, it's kind of a technological step backwards. But in another sense, for an artist, it probably is like a unique way of like, okay, here's a way that I can make more money from my music. It's another way of sort of like diversifying how I can interact with my audience. Varb says there's even a Minecraft track on vinyl. Well, that's kind of wild. Okay, so like, I'm just speculating. I'm not Mr., marketing genius or anything. Far from it. But I will say, I could imagine a time coming up in the not too distant future where, CDs probably won't, compact discs probably won't make a comeback, but like there will probably be some kind of physical media revival for video games, especially in the independent publishing sort of venues, right? Odds are it'll probably be like I could easily see more games being sold on like USB kind of a situation. Not Save says Stardew Valley also has a big vinyl compilation in 4 sleeves, one for each of the seasons, and the artwork on it is fantastic. So yeah, I mean that's kind of like I said, like there's always going to be an underground. That's not even the word I want to use. Underground isn't the appropriate word. There's always going to be like sort of a counterculture. Not Save says the Amazing Digital Circus also has a limited vinyl. There's always going to be sort of a counterculture present, even when you have like sort of a large and maybe even at times overwhelming like hegemony culture, if that makes sense. The question is not necessarily if it'll happen, but in what form it will take, right? And this is where I'm just kind of speculating. And because we've all seemed to sort of like scoped out what are going to be the inevitable trends, right? And so I'm always sort of interested, like, okay, but what are the non-inevitabilities, or what are the things that are unintended consequences of the inevitabilities? And that's why I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like USBs make the most sense to me because most computers still have USB connections. Now of course, I could see how that could get phased out. Although it's hard, I don't know, maybe not. It's hard to imagine it getting phased out, but it could happen. USBs could become, like USB connections could become like, the future nostalgia. I mean, kind of going in line with what Varb was saying with physical input, that could certainly go away as everything becomes wireless. But I'm probably going to be one of those, those old fogies who's like, I still want my USB connection on my computer. Screw you. In fact, I'm pretty much, I mean, that's pretty much a guarantee. I'm going to try and avoid letting that transition take over my computing capabilities, but we'll see. I couldn't stop headphone jacks from disappearing, and I'm very upset about that, actually. Varb says, most people have a need to be unique. Sometimes to a point, unique becomes more popular than normal. It creates kind of a sinusoid. I'm not sure, you might mean a different word, of what's, maybe mean symptom of what's niche, underground, and what's not. Sinusoid. Well, and that's like, I mean, that's, you can also trace that to just modern art movements, right? Most hipsters, like in modern culture in particular, and I'm sure I could find, if I looked hard enough and I came up with enough of a thesis to back this up, I would say that I could say it in older cultures, but in modern culture, and by modern I mean like probably starting around, probably starting around 1890s. So like with the invention of the camera, art has largely become sort of this weird back and forth of like what's popular, what's unpopular. And so like the thing that becomes popular becomes the thing that, because there's hipsters for every age, right? Back in the 1890s or early 1900s, those hipsters were called Dadaists, and they did their hipster thing, and then in the 19 kind of... All right, I'll put it... This is the way that I'll put it. Because I always thought this theory was kind of interesting, and this was a theory that I learned in a new media art class, or in a digital media class. And the theory was those countercultures exist like antibodies in the larger cultural system. So let's say for the internet, right? You have a big corporate influence on the internet that creates really boring corporate art that, you know, some people that doesn't bother them. For a lot of people, they find it annoying and they don't like it. So almost as an antibody response, they create some sort of meme culture or art that is largely, you know, built towards either making fun of the like boring corporate art or just pointing out like its inherent flaws or whatever, right? So I've always kind of found that to be an interesting theory. I find it sort of, I think my only issue with that theory is it sort of presumes that all popular culture is essentially, you know, I mean, it is viral in nature, but it is essentially like negative, right? I don't know if I necessarily feel that way or think that way, you know, in my most hipster moments, yeah, for sure. But I do like the general theory. I do like the general idea because it does sort of give a unique perspective on how we could look at art and sort of what art's function is or can be in society or in culture or in whatever any of those words even mean nowadays. Like, because everything's become so also simultaneously decentered. Not Save says not maybe not always viral, but frequently reactive. And so, yeah, and so it is sort of like, you know, another analogy I guess I could use is sort of like the Hindu samsara analogy, where it's just like, well, you know, this is just the way it's going to be. It's always going to be sort of in this perpetual loop, because that's just like human nature. That's the nature of the material world, et cetera, et cetera. But, or as that, what song was that? Big wheel keeps on turning. So anyway, I mean, I'm going to try and keep my USB ports as long as I can, but I couldn't do anything about the headphone jacks. I did not like losing headphone jacks. I do not like the Bluetooth apparatuses for headphones. I'm just not a fan. Not Safe says, it's the nature of the material world and we are all just material girls. Yes, thank you, Not Safe. Proud Mary is the Big Will song. La da 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 dee. La da 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 da. Is that Sonny and Cher? I'm trying to remember who sang that song. I'm trying my damnedest to make Varb just be like, what are these boomers talking about? I don't even... I mean, there's a. I guess I make that joke because there are even a lot of millennials who are like, who don't know what a lot of that stuff is. Wait, Proud Mary is. Oh, okay. I know what song you're talking about. I'm thinking of a different song. But Proud Mary is also pretty good. There's like several songs that actually use probably those lyrics. I'm realizing. Varp says you can always make a chain from disk reader to USB, from USB to a device that has Bluetooth internet, then to whatever comes next. I'm telling you what's coming next. Well, I guess if I were the one making this stuff up, Varp says it'd take a while transporting data this way though. It sure would. It would be rather inconvenient. It would be wildly inconvenient. Oh gosh dog it. I have to clean up this a little bit. And as I've said earlier, it's like there are the things that we can expect will happen. There's always the things where we don't have any expectations at all. And those are the things that often like kind of take technological development into a totally, you know, different area than we were expecting. But it's very difficult to speculate on things you can't expect. Sadly. Not Save says the cycle of samsara reminds me of the old hymn "Will the Circle Be Unbroken." The comparisons as a culture collision would be neat. Yeah, that is actually really interesting. I don't know the lyrics to "Will the Circle Be Unbroken" that well. I listen to that song a lot, but that's one of those songs where I listen to the melody a lot more than I listen to the lyrics. So I guess I'm gonna have to do that. That's gonna have to get done. Um, I'm notoriously bad about not paying attention to lyrics in songs though. Like for the longest time, like at the end of the Rush song, "Closer to the Heart," I never realized that it was "Sailing into Destiny." For the longest time, I thought they were saying "Satan into Destiny." I was like, "Whoa, that's a pretty like, what are they trying to say?" And I looked at the lyrics like, "Oh, I'm just stupid." Okay. um, like Tom Sawyer has some lyrics where I'm like, what? I think it's just like the way Geddy Lee sings it. It's very like difficult to parse out exactly what he's saying. Not Safe says Bioshock had a great version of it. It chose a somber and contemplative tone, where others choose upbeat bluegrass sound. No, I was just there's a lot of older rock songs that I just didn't. Queen also has a lot of lyrics where I like did not understand what the lyrics were for the longest time. And I would just like eggcorn a lot of the words. Not say it's the proper way. That's the proper way to write a D&D campaign. I made an entire pencil and paper system out of like the Ronnie James Dio discography. It was one of my favorite things ever. It was a lot of fun. All right, I think we're gonna use Payne's Gray here for the shading. Oh, this is too dark. Boo. Not Safe says that sounds like it would be to do. Yeah, it was fun. And it's fun too when you know, like, cause I built it strictly, for my friends. So like, basically building it on sort of like knowing their personalities and almost building the game design around like how I could, uh, kind of exploit their antagonistic relationships with each other. Barb says, I think video. Yeah, it sure did break. You're right. Good catch. Give me a second here. All right. How did I do this? I'm trying to remember. I think what I did. How did I do this? Okay, there it goes. All right, cool. I wonder what causes it to. Yay, we're back. Okay. The quest for a fully properly working camera continues. I like this setup a lot, but I think I need a better, like, stable connection camera. Because right now I'm just using my smartphone. And it's, the setup works all right, but as y'all are seeing, there are some issues sometimes where the camera will just poop out for some reason. Previously, I was using a Logitech webcam, but it was a nightmare to set up, and it wasn't a good camera. I'm gonna have to like find a different camera ultimately. I keep dialing in the setup a little better. Every couple of weeks. But yeah, the name of that whole thing was called Escape from Dia World. And if I had infinite money, I would for sure like contact the Ronnie James Dio estate and just like ask for a license so that I could develop it properly, because it was a lot of fun. I have to touch that up a little bit in a second. But yeah, it's hard to know. Like, maybe, who knows? Maybe physical reality will be a nostalgic thing in about 50 years. People will be like, oh, you remember when we inhabited physical bodies and didn't exist solely in cyberspace? Oh, yeah, that was fun. Varb says, Clinic of Horrors moment. Maybe that's all demonic possession is. Maybe that's just like, oh, I do miss living in a body. And they're like, oh, I forgot how to operate this thing. Oh my god. And then it's, horrible for everybody involved. Or perhaps that's why aliens visit the planet Earth, is like, you remember when we were like that? I sure do miss it. Okay, I think this illustration is done. Oh, no, not quite. Hold on. There's something I want to touch up just a tad. Perhaps even our universe was created out of nostalgia. Alright, yeah, that's a little closer look. Give you an idea. No, I think I like that. It's like, maybe I need to do another pass on this. Maybe I do. Maybe I do. Varb says that sounds kind of like Boltzmann's brain. As far as I understand, wasn't the idea behind Boltzmann's brain sort of like, given an infinite amount of time and the perturbations of atomic reality, that at some point, if in fact time is infinitely available, you would get like a brain created out of those perturbations. But I might be getting that mixed up with something else. Not Save says, I would sometimes troll people with it, saying that it's functionally ideal. Alright, so that one's done. Oh, I forgot about this one. This one needs to get painted. Maybe I'm going to paint this one. My little top hat spider. Hold on, I need to erase real quick. You always want what you don't no longer have, right? Even if you're God, you kind of miss out on not being God. I guess that's how that works. I sure do miss not being everything. What would it be like to have a distinct and minute ego? I just remember it so fondly. And then, you know. Oh, wait, this was a mistake. How do I get out of here? I don't know. Maybe there is an enjoyment. Who knows? Okay. I think that takes care. All right. Not Safe says, the universe may be a nostalgic recreation of a simpler universe. Varb says, yes, but also that just a brain with memories of universe is more likely than an actual entire universe. Oh, that's interesting. I like that. That is probably mathematically more succinct. Not Save says, it feels like a playful ribbing at the expense of Occam's razor. Oh yeah, well Occam's razor. The Occam's razor in my drawer is pretty dull. Not Save says, that's the gimmick of my D&D world. The whole universe is just a god that split itself to make up all of existence and explore itself. I do wonder if there's a certain aspect of that. Varb says, pretty sure Boltzmann's brain was disproved at some point, but I don't remember exactly. I mean, I get how, like, you can mathematically disprove stuff. But the universe isn't math. But the universe contains math. I'll leave it at that. Because I don't know how, like, Varb says math is our way of perceiving the universe. Well, it's definitely a way of perceiving the universe, that's for sure. And it's definitely the most readily available way to communicate it mind to mind, which is why it's so very useful. And it would be very difficult to communicate things. There are certain things that are very difficult to communicate with math, at least currently. And I'm not sure, like, I'm pretty sure you could mathematically, like, suss out, like, okay, given these parameters, what is possible, right? That's what people like about math, right? That's what I like about math. However, the universe becomes communicable through math, but to say that it exists on mathematical principles is like sort of saying that I exist based on sentence structure. If that even makes sense. It's sort of a putting the menu before the meal sort of thing. Not knocking math, we need it. I don't know how else I'm supposed to understand this crazy thing otherwise. But it's a very difficult notion I'm trying to get out. It's still a funny idea, though. I like the idea of Boltzmann's brain, although it sounds sort of horrifying too. I'm gonna paint the spider. Oh. But if I had to put odds on it, I would be with you, Verb, in saying like, yeah, odds are pretty low that Boltzmann's brains are a thing. Not Save says, I had fun with B brains. It has a sort of don't remember, don't remember, don't remember sort of anxiety that it gives. Not Save says that'd be a fun sort of psychological horror story. Varb says, yeah, sorry, bro, you don't exist. We're all just some floating brain's memories. Also, it dies instantly because, void, so only quote unquote exists for a millisecond. Ah, but in that millisecond, all of existence happened in a brief flicker, and we were none the wiser. I think that's how I would describe what I'm trying to say about math is it's not exactly great at describing what is experiential, but it is very good at describing what is predictable and not says chill. Peace out then. I think I messed up this mustache. He's gonna have like a miscolored mustache. Boo. Not Save says math is good at what is experience able, but less so for experiences. Oh, I like that. That makes sense. I had to think about that for a second. I was like, yeah, that tracks. That actually tracks really well. Yeah, it is. It's good for what is possible to experience, but not great at what is experienced. And sometimes there are misalignments between human experience and math. maths. Alright, I'm going to have to figure out how to fix this situation later. I think I have a solution. But I have to wait for the paint to dry. Hot Save says, what a spooky gentleman. 1010 would panic at Sam and asking him to leave politely. Maybe I want that to be purple. Sir, you do not seem to understand that you are a spider. What? This is an establishment of flies. Not Save says, I really appreciate those quadricles. Hell yeah. Alright. I want a different... Okay. Trying to figure out what kind of colors to use. Oh, that's what I'm going to do. The old Payne's Gray. If there is a mathematical disproving of the Boltzmann brain, I need to find out what it is because I'm very curious. It's very interesting to me. Varp says, I'm physically incapable of Googling when I'm watching YouTube on the phone. Sorry. Oh, don't worry about it. I'm going to look at it later tonight. I'm sure it'll make a very interesting YouTube video subject, too. There's probably at least 5 YouTube videos about it. at least 5. I mean, I'm thinking about it right now. If you were a Boltzmann brain, you could never prove that you were a Boltzmann brain. Because you'd have to be outside of yourself, which would mean you'd be outside of the known universe. That's the first thing that comes to my mind, anyway. Just using very, very, low-grade logic. Caveman logic. Oh, I forgot the cane. Oops. I'll have to fix that in post. Okay. What next? Alright, I'm gonna color this cane purple to go with the purple accent on his top hat. Awesome. Is that finished? Not quite. Not save says no cane. That's a caning. I don't know if the purple works. I might end up changing that. Alright. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I like that color. I'm gonna stare at it for another. You know what it is? I think it needs to be more of a little more on the red side. Yeah. Gotta let that dry for a second here. Alright, what else we got? Could do this one next. should be pretty doable. I think so. Seems like the most approachable watercolor to do next. Oh, it's 5. Alright, yeah, I'm going to do this last one, and I think I might call it after that. Because I still need to practice Tai Chi while the sun's still out. Alright, so that's our little gentleman spider. I'm gonna erase the pencils on this one real quick. I would do it on camera, but I have found in the past that the motion of me shaking the table disengages the camera. So I don't want to do that. Still a little pencil mark. All right. This will probably be my last stream for the week because I'm going to go on a camping trip with some friends. Just enjoy the nice springtime weather taking place in Louisiana. Probably going to play some yard games, do some day drinking, immediately regret it the next day, and then not do that again for another year. Tomorrow I'll mostly be traveling and visiting with family. Not Save says, that sounds like a fun time. Enjoy. Well, thank you. I will. I always enjoy it. It's sort of a annual thing that we do. This ivory black watercolor paint is a little bit tricky to work with. How many of it? Painted 3. Okay, so I'll just probably paint the rest Monday. I haven't done a landscape painting this week. I might just have to live with that. This might be just an off week for me for landscape painting. I've been attempting not to overdo it. Because I don't know, I think I burned myself out last week a little bit. Because I noticed I was like, I don't know, I've been probably trying to do too many things all at once. Because this week my body's been kind of like, let's slow down a little bit. Sure. Let's not, let's take it a little easier. Also, I haven't been sleeping as well because the dang birds outside my window are so loud in the morning. So they like wake me up like way earlier than I want to wake up. Cause like they get up like around 5:30 or yeah, it's like around 5:30, which is a little too early for me. And so I'm just like, come on, just sleep in. I need a flash tone. Okay. Oh, I have one already. Oh. Well, maybe I'll just mix in a little bit, just in case. Alright. Not Save says the early bird awakens the artist. It's true. I could do that. Like comparing these two tones. Take a little bit of that. Mix it in here. Okay. Getting into the zone here a little bit. I may want to do another wash on this yellow color for the sandals. I may just, I don't know, I might do another wash for everything on this one. Just seems like it's coming out a little bit lighter than I would like. Except for the flesh tone. That's the only... I got that right. Yep, I'm going to have to do another pass on that orange. Gosh dog it. Alright, here's what we're going to do. This might be too loaded. Yep, that works better. Just wasn't... Something in the color scheme just felt off. Ah, and the camera froze on me again. Ooh. Consarn it. Yep, I'm gonna have to get a different camera set up. Yep. Yuppin'. How did I turn this off? I have to remind myself how to do this every time it happens. What are we doing here? All right. I almost think it might be a wireless issue. Okay, there we are. Because for some reason, it won't let me just like hardwire the phone through a USB connection. I have to do it through the Wi-Fi, and I'm just like, that makes zero sense. So what I think is probably happening is like every 35 to 40 minutes or so, the my phone gets kicked off the Wi-Fi. And so I have to restart it every time. Because I feel like the Wi-Fi in my apartment is operated by like a devious little gremlin who doesn't like me to have nice things. So like anytime I'm like uploading a file, downloading a file, doing anything that requires large bandwidth, and maybe that gremlin's name is AT&T, but it kicks me off. I'm just like, okay, thanks. That's super helpful. I'm sure that gremlin would like come out of the router and be like, well, if you pay me an extra $20 a month, maybe I'll behave a little better. Well, is that how we're doing things? Yeah, that's how we're doing things. I see how it is. Not Save says, dang, I was just about to joke about AT&T. And then I named the gremlin's actual name, which is unpronounceable in the English language or any language known to humanity. The gremlin is forced then to give me free internet for the rest of my life. That's how that story ends. Alright, I'm kind of... Yeah, I'll do like a yellow or something. Like a yellow ochre for the bony parts. The bone... skull bone stuff. Oop, that's a little too much. Not Save says, the happy end we all deserve. So if we can just learn AT&T's horrible and unspeakable true name, a name so horrible and unspeakable that it cannot even be heard by the human ear. What the heck is that? That wasn't what I mixed at all. I guess that works. Alright, well. Making that work. And that's why you always need to have a little bit of paper towel at the ready when you're working with watercolor. Not saves us. It's pronounced in varying pitches of Wi-Fi wavelengths. The horrible, unspeakable, unutterable name. Okay. Let's do shading. Might have to do a little bit of cleanup on this one. Not Save says, I like this character's design. Is she canon or just a project? She is in a future episode of Legend of Redneck. She's just like a background character. And so I was going to do an illustration of her for this secret project that I'm working on, that this is part of. I mean, pseudo secret. I mean, I'm literally working on it in front of you, but its appearance is obvious, but its purpose is mysterious and hidden. Oh no, that's not what I wanted at all. Yeah, I'm going to have to stop after this one because I'm noticing myself kind of flubbing a bit. Yeah, because like I have been trying to incorporate more background characters into Legend of Redneck in the last couple episodes I've been doing. Because I want to populate Ganondorf's castle with a little bit more of a like a, I don't know what you would call it, atmospheric cast. And that creates fun opportunities for character designs I wouldn't normally use. Because they can be kind of one-off. Okay, I think that's done. I'm gonna get out the old gel pen. Just clean up a little bit. Because this illustration was a little bit on the messier side. Just a tad. Okay. Yeah, I like her palette. Her palette turned out way better than I thought it was going to be. Okie dokie. So, there you go. I'm gonna start closing shop here. But this is all I got done today. I mean, this is pretty much all I've done today because I didn't really do any Legend of Redneck stuff today, other than this. So anyway, I'm gonna go practice Tai Chi in a second. I hope y'all have a great rest of your day, evening, what have you. And a great weekend. I'll see you on the other side of that weekend. I'll be doing presumably another stream. But until then, y'all have a good one, alright? And we will talk again in the future. Bye.